Rain lashed against the attic windows. Wind howled like a banshee trapped outside. Clare Graham shivered, pulling her sweater tighter. She knelt amidst a treasure trove of forgotten memories, her grandmother's belongings. Her fingers brushed against a dusty wooden box, its hinges groaning as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of sepia-toned photographs, their edges curled with time. Faces, both familiar and unknown, stared back at her. Beneath the photographs, a leather-bound journal lay hidden. Its cover was worn, stained with what looked disturbingly like blood. Claire's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a family history, it was a Pandora's box of secrets waiting to be unleashed. She cautiously lifted the journal, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. As she opened it, a gust of wind slammed against the attic window, as if warning her of the darkness she was about to uncover. The first page displayed a name scrawled in elegant cursive, Eleanor Graham, 1888. Claire delved deeper into the journal, each word painting a chilling narrative of her family's past. By the flickering light of a solitary candle, Claire read Eleanor's chilling account. The curse, she wrote, was bound to their bloodline, a sinister inheritance passed down through generations. It fed on their deepest fears, their darkest secrets, growing stronger with each generation. Eleanor wrote of strange symbols appearing around the house, whispers in the dead of night, and chilling encounters with an unseen entity.
It's just the wind.
Claire shuddered, her gaze darting around the dusty attic, half expecting to see the symbols Eleanor had described. The shadows seemed to dance in the flickering candlelight, taking on sinister, elongated forms. She could have sworn she heard the soft whisper of her name, carried on the wind that moaned through the cracks in the old attic windows.
It's just the wind,
she muttered to herself, trying to rationalize the goosebumps that prickled her skin. Claire decided to make herself a cup of tea, hoping the warmth would chase away the creeping chill that had settled deep within her. As she turned to leave, a sudden crash from the far end of the attic made her jump. Claire cautiously made her way through the labyrinth of discarded furniture and forgotten relics that cluttered the attic. Each creak of the floorboards and groan of the old house sent shivers down her spine. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable sense of dread. She could have sworn the whispers grew louder, swirling around her like phantom fingers. Reaching the far corner of the attic, her gaze fell upon a rocking chair, its silhouette stark against the faint moonlight filtering through a dusty window. The rocking chair was moving, swaying gently back and forth as if propelled by an unseen hand. The sight sent a wave of icy fear through Claire.
All right, who's playing games?
She asked, her voice sharper than intended, but the only response was the creaking of the rocking chair and the relentless howling of the wind outside. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, scrutinized by unseen eyes. Suddenly, amidst the shadows, a figure coalesced. It was her grandmother, her features etched with an unearthly sadness, her eyes filled with a haunting plea. Claire gasped. Stumbling backward in fright, the candle slipped from her grasp, plunging the attic into an even deeper darkness. Panic surged through her, threatening to overwhelm her. She scrambled for the fallen candle, her fingers closing around the smooth wax.
Grandma!
She called out, her voice trembling in the darkness. But there was no answer, only the echo of her own fear reverberating through the stillness. As she fumbled with the candle, she felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. She whirled around, her heart pounding in her chest. But there was nothing there, only the oppressive darkness and the lingering feeling of an unseen presence. The ghostly apparition of her grandmother vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Claire in a state of heightened anxiety. The attic seemed to close in around her, the darkness pressing against her like a physical weight.
Show yourself!
Claire demanded, her voice trembling but laced with a flicker of defiance. The whispers intensified, morphing into gut-wrenching sobs and mournful screams that seemed to claw at her sanity. Claire covered her ears, desperate to shut out the terrifying sounds. Her back pressed against the cold stone wall, she slid down, her body trembling uncontrollably. The shadows writhed and twisted, taking on grotesque shapes that danced at the periphery of her vision. Fear, raw and primal, pulsed through Claire's veins. She watched in horror as the attic walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with an eerie rhythm. The whispers grew louder, forming words that she couldn't quite decipher. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, as if the house itself was speaking to her. Panic threatened to consume her, but Claire fought back. She had to regain control, had to find a way out of this nightmare. She scrambled to her feet, her gaze darting around the attic, searching for an escape from the oppressive darkness and the terrifying sounds that seemed to assault her from all directions. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. Claire coughed, her eyes stinging. As she moved deeper into the attic, her hand brushed against something cold and hard. She flinched, her heart leaping into her throat. Fumbling for her lighter, she flicked it on, the small flame a beacon in the suffocating darkness. The sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. In the center of the attic, hidden amongst the discarded furniture and forgotten relics, stood a small wooden altar. It was draped in a black cloth, embroidered with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and shift under the flickering light of her lighter. Candles, their wax melted into grotesque shapes, surrounded a collection of objects that sent shivers down her spine, animal bones. A tarnished silver chalice and a lock of hair tied with a crimson ribbon. Claire felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a shroud. The air around the altar crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of something ancient and malevolent. She recognized the symbols from her great-great-grandmother's journal, the same symbols that Eleanor had described with such terror. Her gaze fell upon a book lying open on the altar, its pages filled with handwritten text and intricate diagrams.
The book was bound in what looked like human skin, its surface cold and clammy beneath my fingertips.
An overwhelming sense of dread washed over her, urging her to flee, but curiosity, a thirst for knowledge that bordered on reckless, rooted her to the spot.
With trembling hands, I reached for the book.
As her fingers brushed against the desiccated skin, the room seemed to plunge into an even deeper darkness. The air crackled with static electricity, making the hairs on her arms stand on end.
The whispers and moans reached a fever pitch, swirling around me like a vortex of despair.
Ignoring the primal fear that clawed at her sanity, Claire opened the book. The pages were filled with arcane symbols and incantations written in a language she didn't recognize, but instinctively understood to be steeped in dark magic. Suddenly, the attic erupted in a cacophony of supernatural chaos. The candles on the altar extinguished simultaneously, plunging the room into absolute darkness. Objects, propelled by an unseen force, flew across the room with violent force.
A heavy picture frame crashed against the wall just inches from my head, showering me with shards of glass.
Screams, filled with an unearthly rage and anguish, reverberated through the attic, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air crackled with unseen energy, making it difficult to breathe.
I cowered on the floor, my hands over my head as the supernatural maelstrom raged around me. The temperature plummeted, the air becoming frigid, as if a window to the Arctic had been thrown open.
Panic surged through Claire, threatening to overwhelm her. She scrambled backward, her hands searching for something, anything to defend herself. Her fingers grasped a heavy silver candlestick, its surface cold and slick against her palm.
Brandishing it like a weapon, I rose to my feet, my heart pounding against my ribs like a war drum. "Leave me alone! Get away from me!"
But her pleas were met with mocking laughter from the shadowy figures that surrounded her. They continued to advance, their forms flickering and shifting, their eyes burning with an unholy light.
Desperation lent me a surge of strength I didn't know I possessed. I lunged forward, swinging the candlestick with all my might.
As she reached for the doorknob, a cold hand clamped around her wrist. Claire cried out, her blood turning to ice in her veins. She struggled against the grip, but it was inhumanly strong, its touch draining the warmth from her body.
The whispers intensified, morphing into a chorus of voices chanting my name, their tone filled with a mixture of amusement and malice. I whipped my head around, my eyes wide with terror.
She found herself face to face with a figure shrouded in darkness, its features obscured by the shadows. The only discernible features were its eyes, which burned with an unholy fire, their gaze piercing her soul.
A wave of dizziness washed over me. I felt myself being dragged back, pulled towards the heart of the darkness that permeated the attic. My vision blurred, the shadowy figures around me swirling together into a vortex of fear and despair.